I have watched defendants lie with tears in their eyes. I have watched millionaires beg, thieves collapse, and parents turn against their own children under oath. But in all my years on the bench, I had never seen anyone do what Karen Mitchell did that morning. She called 911 from inside my courtroom, not because there was danger, not because someone had threatened her, but because she believed the judge herself needed to be removed. Believe me when I tell you, even after decades in court, there are moments that make you stop and silently ask yourself, how did this person get this far? That morning began like any other small claims case. The gallery was full. The bailiff stood near the side wall. Papers shuffled. Cameras were ready. Everyone expected a loud argument over property damage between neighbors. What they got instead was a woman who walked into my courtroom as if the building belonged to her. Karen Mitchell was in her late 40s, perfectly dressed, chin lifted, sunglasses still resting on top of her head. She did not look nervous. That was the first thing I noticed. Most people entering a courtroom carry at least a small trace of fear. Even the arrogant ones understand they are stepping into a place where rules matter. Karen didn't. She looked at my courtroom like it was an inconvenience. The plaintiff, Rachel Morgan, stood quietly at the other table. She looked exhausted in that way people look when they have been fighting the same battle for too long. Her hands were folded around a small folder, and every few seconds she glanced at Karen like she was afraid one wrong movement might set her off. That told me more than the complaint did. Years on the bench teach you something very important. Before anyone speaks, the body tells the truth. Rachel's body said fear. Karen's body said control. The case was simple on paper. Rachel claimed Karen had repeatedly damaged her front yard, blocked her driveway, screamed at delivery drivers, and finally destroyed a security camera after being recorded trespassing. Karen denied everything. According to her written response, Rachel was obsessed, unstable, and trying to become famous. I had seen that tactic before. When people cannot defeat evidence, they try to destroy the character of the person bringing it. So I opened the case calmly. I asked Rachel to explain what happened. Her voice shook, but her words were clear. She described months of harassment, late-night pounding on windows, strange notes left on her porch, and one incident where Karen allegedly stood in her driveway, yelling that Rachel had stolen the neighborhood peace. The courtroom was quiet, then Karen laughed. Not loudly, not like someone amused. It was colder than that, controlled, sharp. A little performance for the room. I looked at her and said, "Mom, this is not funny." She smiled at me. That smile stayed with me because it was not embarrassment. It was not anger. It was confidence. She truly believed no one in that courtroom could touch her. Then Rachel opened her folder and handed over the first set of photographs. Broken flower pots, tire marks across the lawn, a cracked porch light, a damaged camera hanging from a wire. Karen leaned forward, looked at the pictures and said, "Those are fake." I asked her, "All of them?" She said, "Obviously." The audience shifted. Even the bailiff looked at her for a second longer than usual. And that was when I noticed something disturbing. Karen was not reacting like a woman defending herself. She was reacting like a woman who had already planned the next move. I asked Rachel if she had video. Rachel nodded. Karen's face changed for half a second, only half a second, but I saw it. The screen turned on. The courtroom lights dimmed slightly, and before the video even played, Karen reached into her purse. I told her, "Put the phone away." She looked straight at me and said, "No, I'm calling the police." At first, I thought I had misheard her. Then I heard the dialing tone, and the courtroom went completely silent. When a person reaches for a phone in court, there is usually panic behind it. A family emergency. A fear response, sometimes confusion. But Karen Mitchell did not look confused. She held that phone like a weapon. I watched her thumb move across the screen while the entire courtroom stared at her. Rachel Morgan froze at the plaintiff's table, her folder still open. The photographs spread before her like pieces of a story she had been begging someone to believe. My bailiff took one step forward. I raised my hand slightly. Not because I wanted to protect Karen from consequences, but because I wanted to understand exactly how far she was willing to go. That is something people outside the courtroom do not always understand. A judge does not only listen to words. A judge watches patterns. Pressure reveals character faster than testimony ever can. And Karen, under pressure, was revealing something very ugly, I said. "Mom, you are in a courtroom. Put the phone down." She lifted her chin and whispered into the phone. "Yes, I need officers sent here immediately." A murmur passed through the gallery. Rachel's eyes filled with the kind of fear I had seen too many times from people who had been bullied privately and finally exposed publicly. She was not afraid of the police. She was afraid Karen would somehow twist this moment too. Karen looked toward Rachel and said into the phone, "There is a woman here making false accusations, and the judge is allowing it." That was the first time the room truly turned cold. Because now this was no longer arrogance. It was an attempt to hijack the authority of the courtroom itself. I leaned forward and asked, "Are you reporting an emergency?" Karen covered the phone and looked at me as if I were interrupting her at a restaurant. "I am reporting judicial misconduct," she said. The words sounded prepared, too prepared, and that told me something important. Karen had not come to court to defend a case. She had come to perform a takeover. Rachel Morgan, on the other hand, had come with nothing but evidence and exhaustion. She was a single mother who worked as an elementary school office assistant. She lived in a small blue house at the end of Maple Ridge Lane. From the documents, I could see she had tried every peaceful method before filing the claim. Emails, neighborhood mediation, police reports, repair receipts. That mattered. People who are lying often rush straight to drama. People who are telling the truth usually leave a trail of patience behind them. Rachel's trail was long. Karen's trail was loud. I asked Rachel how long the problems had been going on. She swallowed hard and said, "Almost 9 months, Your Honor." 9 months. That is not a dispute. That is a campaign. Karen laughed again and said, "She's obsessed with me." I turned to her. "You will speak when I ask you to speak." Her smile disappeared. For the first time, she understood that my courtroom was not her neighborhood street, not her homeowners meeting, not her driveway at midnight. It was a place where interruption had consequences. But instead of stopping, Karen raised the phone louder. The 911 operator's faint voice came through the speaker. The bailiff moved closer. I said, "Mom, end the call." Karen said, "No, I want this judge removed." Several spectators gasped. Rachel lowered her eyes. And in that small movement, I saw the whole emotional history of the case. Rachel was not shocked. She was used to Karen escalating whenever she lost control. That is what controlling people often do. When facts trap them, they create chaos. Chaos gives them oxygen. Then Karen made her biggest mistake yet. She pointed at Rachel and said into the phone, "She is dangerous. She has been stalking me. I want her detained." Rachel's mouth opened, but no words came out. The courtroom turned toward her. And for one terrible second, I understood exactly what Karen had been doing for months. She had not just been damaging property. She had been trying to turn the victim into the threat. I looked at the evidence screen, still waiting to play Rachel's video. Then I looked at Karen's phone, and I realized the real case had only just begun. I have learned that every courtroom has a breaking point. Sometimes it comes when evidence appears. Sometimes it comes when a witness finally stops protecting someone. And sometimes it comes when one person is so convinced of their own power that they forget the courtroom is not built around their feelings. Karen Mitchell had reached that point. She stood there with the phone still in her hand, speaking to the 911 operator as if she were the only lawful person in the room. The bailiff was now close enough to take the phone, but I still held him back for one reason. I wanted the record to capture Karen's behavior clearly. In court, truth is not only what people say under oath. Sometimes truth is what they do when they think rules no longer apply to them. I asked her one more time, "Are you claiming there is a physical emergency in this courtroom?" Karen looked at me and said, "The emergency is that you're letting her lie." That sentence told the jury, the gallery, and everyone watching exactly who she was. Not frightened. Not confused. Offended. Offended that someone dared to question her. Rachel Morgan stood motionless beside her evidence. I could see her hands trembling, but she did not interrupt. That quiet restraint mattered. The contrast between the two women was becoming impossible to ignore. Karen was demanding police intervention. Rachel was waiting for the court to hear the truth. Then the video finally began. The first clip appeared on the screen. It was from Rachel's front porch camera, dated 11:42 p.m., a quiet street, a porch light, a row of flower pots beside the walkway. Then Karen appeared. The courtroom inhaled at once. There she was, wearing a dark jacket, walking across Rachel's lawn with a flashlight in her hand. She looked around, stepped onto the porch, picked up one of the flower pots, and threw it against the railing. Rachel covered her mouth. Karen shouted, "That's edited!" But her voice had changed. That calm, controlled confidence was cracking. The prosecutor did not need to say anything. I did not need to raise my voice. The screen was doing the work. The second clip showed tire tracks being made across the grass. Karen's SUV rolled slowly over Rachel's front yard, reversed, then rolled forward again. It was not an accident. It was deliberate, the gallery began whispering. I looked at Karen. She was no longer speaking into the phone. She was listening. Her eyes moved from the screen to Rachel, then to me, then back to the screen. That is another thing I have learned on the bench. Guilty people often deny evidence immediately. But when the evidence keeps coming, they begin searching the room for escape routes. Corin was searching. Then Rachel's attorney played the third clip. This one was different. It was daytime. Rachel's young son, Tyler, was getting off the school bus. He could not have been older than 9. He walked toward the house with his backpack bouncing against his shoulders. Karen stepped out from behind her fence. She said something to him. The audio was faint, but clear enough. Tell your mother to stop watching me. The courtroom changed. Property damage is one thing. A grown woman confronting a child is something else entirely. Rachel began to cry, but quietly. She tried to hide it, as if even her pain needed permission. I felt my jaw tighten. A judge must remain composed. That is the job. But composed does not mean blind. It does not mean numb. And it certainly does not mean indifferent when a child becomes part of an adult's intimidation campaign. I asked Karen, did you approach that child? Karen said, I was being friendly. No one believed her. Not even Karen believed her. Then the 911 operator's voice came through her phone again, asking if officers were needed immediately. Karen looked at me, then at the screen, then at Rachel. And suddenly, she changed her story. She said, actually, I'm the one being threatened. That was when Rachel reached into her folder with shaking hands and pulled out one final envelope. She looked at me and said, Your Honor, there's something I didn't put in the original claim. Karen's face went pale. And I knew, before the envelope was even opened, that whatever was inside had the power to destroy the entire lie. The moment Rachel Morgan lifted that envelope, Karen Mitchell stopped talking. That silence was more powerful than any objection she could have made, because manipulative people are often loud until they recognize something they cannot control. And in that instant, Karen recognized the envelope. I saw it in her eyes. Rachel handed it to the bailiff. He brought it to my bench, and I looked at the contents carefully. Inside were printed screenshots, handwritten notes, and a small flash drive in a clear plastic sleeve. I asked Rachel, why was this not included in the original complaint? She wiped her cheek and said, because I was scared, Your Honor. Those 5 words changed the temperature of the room. Fear explains delays. Fear explains silence. Fear explains why good people wait too long before asking for help. Karen whispered, this is ridiculous. But this time, nobody looked at her. I reviewed the first page. It was a screenshot from a neighborhood group chat. Karen had written, Rachel is unstable. Watch your kids around her. Another message said, someone should call the school and warn them. I looked up slowly. Rachel worked at a school. That was not random gossip. That was a targeted attack. The second page was worse. An anonymous email sent to Rachel's employer claiming Rachel had dangerous behavior around children. No proof. No name. Just poison dressed like concern. I asked Karen, did you send this? She said, no. Too fast. In my years on the bench, I have heard thousands of denials. The truthful ones usually come with shock. The rehearsed ones arrive before the question fully lands. Then Rachel's attorney asked permission to play the flash drive. Corin immediately stood up. No, that's private. There it was. Not fake. Not edited. Private, the courtroom heard the difference. I allowed the video. The screen turned black for a second. Then a recording appeared from Rachel's driveway camera. Karen was standing beside a man near her mailbox. Her voice was clear. She thinks court will save her, Karen said. By the time I'm done, everyone will think she's crazy. A cold stillness moved through the courtroom. Rachel lowered her head. Karen stared at the screen like she wanted to burn it with her eyes. Then the man in the video asked, what if the judge sees the camera footage? Karen laughed. Then I'll make it about harassment. I'll say she's stalking me. I'll call the police right there if I have to. The gallery erupted. I struck the bench once and brought the room back to order, but I understood their reaction. They were not just hearing evidence. They were watching the plan unfold, exactly as Karen had tried to execute it minutes earlier. That is when cases become unforgettable, not when someone lies, but when the lie is caught breathing in real time. Karen's phone was still connected. The operator's voice came again, asking for clarification. My bailiff finally stepped forward and said, "Mom, hand me the phone." Karen pulled it back. "Don't touch me." Her composure was gone now. The controlled smile, the polished confidence, the sharp little laugh. Everything had cracked, and underneath it was rage. I told her, "You are 1 second away from being held in contempt." She looked at me and said, "You can't do that." That sentence has ruined many people in court, because yes, I can. But before I could respond, the courtroom doors opened. 2 uniformed officers walked in, responding to Karen's own 911 call. Karen turned toward them with sudden relief, as if she had just summoned rescue. She pointed at Rachel. "There," she said. "That's the woman harassing me." But the officers did not move toward Rachel. They looked at the bailiff, then they looked at me, and I said the words that made Karen's face collapse. "Officers, you may want to hear the recording first." I have seen courtrooms explode before. Not physically, emotionally. There is a certain kind of silence that comes right before it. The room stops breathing. People stop moving. Even the air feels heavy, as if everyone understands something irreversible is about to happen. That was the silence inside my courtroom when the officers turned toward the evidence screen. Karen Mitchell had called 911, believing the police would become her weapon. Instead, she had invited them to witness her confession. The recording played again. Her own voice filled the room. She thinks court will save her. By the time I'm done, everyone will think she's crazy. One officer slowly looked from the screen to Karen. That small movement said more than any speech could have. Karen's face changed completely. The confidence was gone. The outrage was gone. Now there was only panic wrapped in denial. "That's not what I meant," she said. But nobody had asked her a question. That is something guilty people often do. They start explaining before anyone accuses them, because their own mind is already building a defense. Then the second part of the recording played. I'll say she's stalking me. I'll call the police right there if I have to. The courtroom reacted like a match had hit gasoline. Spectators gasped. Someone whispered, "Oh my God." Rachel covered her face with both hands. Her attorney lowered his head, almost like he needed a second to absorb the cruelty of what we had all just heard. And Karen turned toward the officers and still tried to perform. She edited that. "She's been recording me illegally." One officer asked calmly, "Mom, did you call 911 from inside this courtroom?" Karen hesitated. That hesitation was the first honest thing she had done all day. "Yes," she finally said, "because I needed help." The officer looked around the courtroom, then back at her. "What was the emergency?" Karen pointed at me. The judge was biased. The entire room went dead quiet. I have been insulted before. Every judge has. Anger comes with the robe. People blame the court when the facts turn against them. But calling emergency services because you dislike being questioned is not frustration. It is abuse of a system meant to protect people in real danger. And Karen had done it while trying to frame the very woman she had been tormenting. Then Rachel's attorney stood and asked permission to submit one final item. Karen shouted, "No!" That shout echoed against the walls. Not fear of embarrassment, fear of exposure. The final item was a police report from 3 weeks earlier. Rachel had called officers after finding a note taped to her son's backpack. The note said, "Your mother is going to lose everything." My courtroom became completely still. Rachel began sobbing now. Not loudly, not dramatically, just brokenly, like a person who had held her breath for 9 months and could not hold it anymore. I looked at Karen. For the first time that day, she would not meet my eyes. I asked, "Did you put that note on a child's backpack?" She said nothing. That silence answered more than her mouth ever could. The officer stepped closer. "Mom, I'm going to need you to stand up." Karen's head snapped toward him. "For what?" he said. "Misuse of emergency services, interfering with court proceedings. And based on what we've just heard, we'll be reviewing possible harassment and false reporting." Karen laughed once, a strange, sharp laugh. Then she said, "You people are making a huge mistake." But no one moved to help her. That was the moment the courtroom changed forever. The same woman who had walked in like she owned the room was now being asked to place her hands behind her back. Rachel watched through tears. The gallery watched in stunned silence. And when Karen refused, when she pulled her arm away and shouted that no one had the right to touch her, the officers did what she never believed could happen. They took her by the arms and dragged her out of the courtroom she had tried to control. I will never forget the sound of those courtroom doors closing behind Karen Mitchell. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Not Rachel, not her attorney, not even the spectators who had whispered through the case only minutes earlier. Because what they had witnessed was not simply a woman being removed from court. They had witnessed a lie collapse under the weight of its own arrogance. Rachel stood at the plaintiff's table with both hands pressed against her mouth. Her shoulders shook. Her attorney gently placed a hand near her folder, not touching her, just reminding her she was no longer standing alone. And I remember thinking something I have thought many times from the bench. Justice is not always loud when it arrives. Sometimes justice is the first breath a frightened person takes after months of being unheard. I looked at the evidence one more time. The damaged property, the videos, the messages, the email, the recording, the note to a child. This was never about a flower pot. It was about control. Karen had not wanted to win a neighborhood argument. She had wanted to rewrite reality until everyone around Rachel doubted her. That is one of the cruelest forms of manipulation because it does not only attack a person's home or reputation, it attacks their trust in themselves. I awarded Rachel the full damages for the repairs, the security camera, and court costs. I also ordered the evidence forwarded for further investigation regarding harassment and false reporting, but before I ended the case, I looked directly at Rachel. I said, "Miss Morgan, you did the right thing by bringing evidence instead of revenge." She broke down again, and this time, nobody saw weakness. They saw relief. Years on the bench have taught me that some victims do not need a dramatic speech. They need the record to finally say what they have been living through was real. Karen Mitchell believed volume could beat truth. She believed a phone call could frighten a courtroom. She believed authority was something she could borrow whenever it served her. But the law does not belong to the loudest person in the room. It belongs to the facts, and on that day, the facts stood up before anyone else did. As Rachel gathered her papers, the gallery remained silent. There was respect in that silence. Even the people who had entered expecting entertainment understood they had seen something deeper. They had seen how quickly a bully becomes helpless when the stage is no longer under her control. And they had seen a mother, exhausted and afraid, finally walk out of court with her name cleared. That is why this case still stays with me. Not because Karen called 911 on a judge, but because she proved, in front of everyone, exactly why Rachel had been afraid for so long. When I left the bench that day, I looked once more at the empty spot where Karen had stood, and I thought about every person watching who might be dealing with someone like her, document everything. Stay calm. Do not match chaos with chaos. Because truth may move slowly. When it finally enters the courtroom, it does not need to scream.